A multi-billion-dollar corporation gets busted breaking the law, enters into a nominal settlement, and shifts the onus of compliance onto its users.
Sounds about right.
Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber. Now, the internet and YouTube in particular is abuzz with the new rules and regulations that are coming into effect in 2020, specifically as relates to content that is directed at children and children's channels. And the new rules that are coming into effect are extremely strict, have potentially very serious financial consequences for non-compliance, and will have serious financial consequences for the channels themselves. Bottom line, and we're going to get back to this, is that channels that have content directed at children are going to have to identify as such, are going to have severe limitations placed on them as relates to the channel, and are going to suffer serious consequences as relates to reduced advertisements and by extension reduced ad revenue on those channels. But before we get there, we need to go back to the beginning, and it starts with a $170 million fine issued against YouTube for violating the terms of the COPPA Act. COPPA Act. Earlier this year, YouTube and Google entered into a settlement with the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, as relates to breaches of the provisions of the COPPA Act. The COPPA Act is the 1998 Children Online Privacy Protection Act, and it was intended to protect children under the age of 13 from certain commercial practices, most notably the gathering of information on those children. The FTC filed a complaint against YouTube and its parent company Google for allegedly harvesting information on children under the age of 13 without their parents' express written consent. Incidentally, I did a live stream with another YouTube lawyer, Nate Brody, on this very subject. I'll link it right here.
This all starts with a law called COPPA. Now, it's passed in 2013, and what it was intended to do, it was intended to protect children's privacy here online. And the way they did it was that platforms like YouTube can't collect data on children under the age of 13 without their express parental consent.
But the complaint was damning to say the least. YouTube and Google were undoubtedly gathering information on children under the age of 13. They were in fact specifically selling that aspect of their business to companies that wanted to market on Google and YouTube, saying that they could specifically target children aged 6 to 11. The allegations were entirely damning against YouTube and Google, and they obviously wanted to avoid a trial on this, so they entered into a settlement in virtue of which they were to pay $170 million to the FTC, or it was $134 million to the FTC and the balance to New York State, and they would ensure that on a going forward basis they would be compliant with the law. Now, while the $170 million fine sounds exorbitant and is by far the largest fine ever levied by the FTC, that represents 2 days of profit of Google. It's not even a slap on the wrist, it's a mere tap on the shoulder. What does YouTube undertake to do in order to be compliant with the provisions of COPPA? They pass the buck onto all YouTube creators. And I have to highlight how offensive this may appear to the layperson. Bear in mind, it was YouTube and Google that was violating the terms of COPPA. It was YouTube and Google collecting data on children under 12 so they could specifically market to those children. They get caught with their hands in the cookie jar. What do? Agree to pay a nominal fine and then pass all of the responsibility down onto the YouTube creators, as we're going to see right now. Now, to be entirely fair to YouTube, it was the FTC themselves who said that they are not only going to go after YouTube and hold YouTube liable, they are also going to go conduct a sweep of YouTube as a whole to make sure that content creators are complying with the provisions of COPPA.
This action is changing YouTube's business model. That YouTube cannot bury its head in the sand. YouTube cannot pretend that it's not aware of the content on its platform and hope to escape liability for COPPA. YouTube is going to be explicitly held liable for complying with COPPA where it has actual knowledge of the content. YouTube is going to be required to seek out that actual knowledge through requiring content creators and channel owners to specifically designate whether they are directed to children. And as the chairman noted, not only can we sue Google and YouTube for compliance with COPPA, but also individual channel owners and content creators. And once this order has been fully implemented, we intend to conduct a sweep.
And the fines that the FTC can levy against non-compliant YouTube creators can be extremely substantial, up to $43,000 and change. And these are matters of strict liability, meaning that the FTC does not have to prove the intent to violate the terms of COPPA. They need only show that YouTube or the content creators are in fact violating the terms of COPPA. And so under the terms of this settlement that YouTube voluntarily entered into, it is now imposing on the content creators the identification of their videos if those videos are directed at children. And the reason why they're imposing that onus on the content creator is that YouTube will then know which videos are directed at children, and they will not gather data from those videos, thus violating the terms of COPPA. But government regulation being what it is, when you attempt to solve one problem, you just create another. And the FTC has come up with certain guidelines as to what content creators should bear in mind in determining whether or not to identify their videos as directed at children. But to say that those guidelines are vague and ambiguous would be an understatement. They are basically causing people to panic. And from what I understand, these new requirements don't just apply to videos on a going forward basis. They apply retroactively to all existing libraries of videos on the platform. Videos and channels that are determined to be directed at children need to be labeled as such so that YouTube can know not to gather information from those videos or channels, thus violating the terms of COPPA. But what are the criteria in order to determine if a video or channel is directed at children? The FTC has set out what many feel to be highly nebulous criteria to determine whether or not content is directed at children, and they read as follows. The subject matter of the site or service, video and audio content, the use of animated characters or other child-oriented activities or incentives, the age of the models, actors, and characters, the presence of child celebrities or celebrities who appeal to kids, ads on the site or service that are directed to children, and other reliable evidence about the age of the actual or intended audience. These are the criteria set out by the FTC, and what is YouTube doing in order to ensure that its content creators are compliant with the settlement YouTube entered into with the FTC? On a going forward basis, at the upload stage, YouTube is going to ask the content creator to confirm if their video is directed at children.
In order to help you comply with the law, we're now required to ask you to mark all of your videos as made for kids or not. So we've launched a new audience setting that lets you tell us if your videos are made for kids or not. In addition to this setting, we'll use machine learning systems to help us find content that is clearly made for kids. But don't rely on our systems to set content for you. Like all automated systems, it's not perfect. If you don't set your audience, or if we detect error or abuse, we may set your audience for you. But in most cases, we'll rely on your audience setting to determine whether a video is made for kids.
On videos that content creators identify as being directed at children, or on videos that YouTube through its algorithm identifies as being directed at children, comments are going to be disabled. There will be no personalized ads, no option for cards, and no options for end screens. Apparently, you will also not be allowed to share those videos, nor will you be allowed to add them to a playlist to watch later.
We will start limiting the data we collect on made for kids content to comply with the law. Features like comments, personalized advertising, info cards, end screens, and more won't be available on individual videos. If your entire channel is set as made for kids, your videos won't have any of those features. Your channel also won't have stories, the community tab, the notification bell, and your viewers won't be able to save to watch later or save to playlist.
And because there are going to be no personalized ads on these videos, the CPM, or the cost per mil, which is the cost per thousand, or basically the metric, the dollar value of the ads that are running on your channel, they're going to drop dramatically, by some estimates upwards of 85%.
Most importantly, those videos won't show personalized ads, so some creators may see a decrease in revenue.
If YouTube determines that content creators are systematically misrepresenting their channel or their videos, YouTube can impose sanctions on that channel. And as of 2020, when the FTC comes in and performs its sweeps on YouTube as a whole, if it finds videos that are not compliant, that have not been identified as directed at children, they will not only go after YouTube, but they will go after the content creators themselves. And now YouTube, in having shifted the onus onto the content creators themselves, can now wash their hands of responsibility and say, FTC, don't come after us, go after the content creator. They are the ones who misrepresented the nature of their video at the upload stage. And let's get back to this whopping, monumental $170 million fine that YouTube agreed to pay because of its overt, egregious violations of the provisions of the COPPA Act. YouTube and Google were the ones who were knowingly violating the COPPA Act. They agreed to pay $170 million, 2 days profits, so that they can then in turn implement a system and shift all of the onus onto the content creators themselves. That is how big business and government works, and isn't it a thing of beauty? That said, and while I like to believe that the FTC really is only going to stick to the spirit of the law and go after the most egregious, obvious cases, there is obviously a risk of government overreach. There is obviously a risk of abuse. There is obviously a risk that this is going to cripple cripple and or crush content creators. There's a very real risk that this might ensnare videos and channels that are actually not at all directed at children, but detected as such by the YouTube algorithm, detected as such by the FTC, which may not really have the best understanding of YouTube content. We all know how well the YouTube AI works, even when it works at its most efficient. We all know how the government doesn't necessarily have the most comprehensive understanding of social media. We all know how the government might also deal with windfalls in terms of revenue coming from violations of ambiguously worded laws. And the ultimate irony in all of this, above and beyond Google paying an infinitesimal fine to shift all of the onus onto its content creators, this is probably not even going to have the desired impact on the most obvious channels which are directed at children, that being big brand channels. Big toy company YouTube channels are not going to give one sweet bippy that they can no longer have ad revenue coming into their channels. That's not where they got their revenue from in the first place. For big toy companies who have YouTube channels to promote their brand, identifying a video as being directed at children so that YouTube doesn't gather information from it, violating the terms of COPPA, is absolutely irrelevant. It's the video itself that is the advertising for that product. The fact that people can't watch it later, add it to a playlist, comment, etc., is going to be absolutely irrelevant to big toy companies who use YouTube to promote their products. But that's it. That is the nature of the interplay between big business and government. The government comes in to solve one problem but ends up creating two more. And we will see how this pans out as of 2020, but all that to say, one is better off erring on the side of caution when uploading new content to the platform. Oh yes, and for those of you who are just dying to get back to the other news that's going on right now of those impeachment hearings, I made a video breaking down the quid pro quo right here. And if you like my content, be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below, links to merch on the bottom, there's a PayPal support link somewhere up in the banner, and now you know your vlog. Peace out. Booyah!